Okay, thank you everyone. Appreciate your patience as we work through these items. So what we'll do now is touch on tupua horonuku. So I'm certainly comfortable to propose that we include the amount which was outlined in the draft annual plan in our budget, and we acknowledge the advice that officers have given us that negotiations are ongoing with Whakatahi and CIP. Things are looking positive, but we won't know the final result of that until later this month. And obviously we can reconsider matters at that time as well when those final decisions come in. Everyone's comfortable with that? Yes? Okay, great. Now we'll go to the recommendations I read out earlier, just around the Orchard House and Gibbs Watson Conservatory. So just to make sure I've captured things right. So notes that officers met with Rotary and discussed the future of the Tutukiwi Orchard House and Gibbs Watson Conservatory buildings in recognition of their historic connection. Notes Rotary did advise officers that they did not think they could make a viable project of the buildings, but also felt that there hadn't been sufficient time for a proposal to be considered. Notes that the Ridderford Gardens and Civic Precinct has had significant investment over the past 6 years. Agrees to mothball the Tutukiwi Orchard House and Gibbs Watson Conservatory for the next 6 months, and demolishes, removes both buildings after 6 months unless a viable proposal is brought forward and led by a third party. Notes that council officers will not be actively involved in seeking or implementing any proposal given time, resourcing constraints and other priorities, and removes the aviary and engages with E2 Trust about future possible art projects at its location or potentially one of the other locations. And just to further comment on the officer time, obviously there will need to be some sort of communication of, hey, an expression of interest, but again, just really, that may be something on our website and hopefully through the media if they can support us with that, but it is not some of the other expressions of interest exercises that we would generally go through for other spaces or places. Councillor Buchan?
Just wondering if we could modify number 5 to actually reflect that advertising on the website.
I don't think we need, I mean, it's sending a clear message there around priorities, but I'm just giving the reassurance that obviously that will happen because we need to do that, but there isn't going to be an active approaching groups or that type of work that's potentially happened in the past. Yep. And we've said it nice and clear here, so everyone's on the same page. Yep. Okay. Great, so I'll move those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. That will now morph into the final budget decisions. Okay, so we now move through to those recommendations, and I'll bring up on the screen some amendments to reflect the conversations that we've had, which we've been working on. So really these recommendations now are going through to number 4, is agrees to the budget matters as detailed in table 2. Also item 5, which is the matters in table 3. Item 6, which is the matters in table 4. And then is also endorsing, as already previously supported, the proposed rates increase of 9.9%. And also endorses the proposed update. Number 10 endorses the proposed updates to the draft annual plan narratives to reflect the latest information in the officer's report. And 11 requires that any decisions made by the annual plan working group are reported back to the council meeting on the 30th of June. Hopefully there's nothing substantial in that, but again, that will come back through to full council. And item 12 notes the further direction and guidance provided to officers ahead of the preparation of the final annual plan that encapsulates the sister city and AED conversation. So that is captured in there. And it's also a bit of a grab-all recommendation to ensure that anything we have discussed or given direction on is followed through by the team. Okay, so I'll move those recommendations 1 through to 12. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tupou. And I'll just get us started with some comments. So first of all, can I say a big thank you to all of the team who have been involved in the preparation of this annual plan, flowing, of course, from last year. I think it's easy to underestimate how much time and effort goes into the preparations, the thinking, the planning, and of course, ultimately the end result. And this has been a pretty challenging annual plan to work through. We know that we have some pretty challenging contexts and operating environment that we're currently in, and I think Jenny covered it well earlier in her presentation, when we've got challenges of high inflation, higher borrowing costs, cost escalation pressures. We've just obviously had a bit of a conversation around that with some of our contracts, and all of the other challenges of simply doing BAU. And I think our Chamber of Commerce President, Mark Scully, puts it quite well when he does talk to his members, is that it's not only just the cost of living crisis or a cost escalation crisis that we're facing, also it's a BAU crisis, because everything is becoming more expensive and more challenging to actually do and deliver. And council is no different to some of the impacts that many of our residents and businesses are feeling in the city and right across the country, and to be honest, across the world, because we know that this is a trend globally as well. But in our community, we do know that there is some really major challenges with the cost of living and the pinch that that's having on families' incomes and what they're able to do. We also know that there are some significant challenges in work and infrastructure that we must continue on doing. Otherwise, it's only going to become more expensive as we do it in the future, or if we delay and don't do things now. That is difficult for us. But we also have a challenge of making sure that we can deliver what we say we're going to do, and that's, I think, quite important in some of the conversations that we've had today and through the process, and what we apply for and what we do. Just to note also that 50% of the rates increase and costs are associated here in some way with Three Waters infrastructure. That continues to be a major challenge for us. We know we have lifted up our investment in that space over the past 3 years, but it will be a continued pressure on us as we work through into our long-term plan next year. Of course, we have reform just around the corner, depending on what happens in the election. I've got no doubt that there will be reform and changes in some way, maybe it just may be faster or slower, depending on the result of the election. That will obviously be an opportunity for us to reassess our direction and what our priority and focus is as a council, particularly if those responsibilities are shifted off our books. And I know we'll continue to do that work, and there's some good information that's already been prepared and will be presented to further to council as well. Just for this annual plan, I did also want to acknowledge that in the early days, in the early pieces, there was a real effort to find savings where possible, and also an effort to avoid cost increases and projected costs coming our way as well. So that is a conversation, I think, that when I talk to my colleagues in the region and the country, that every council has had and has had to go through. So we are no different in that, and I think that the team have made a really good effort in trying to do that, to make this more palatable from an affordability point of view for our residents as well. And also we have focused, of course, on projects that attract or have already attracted government support. We know that that's one of the best ways we can actually mitigate the impact on our ratepayers and on our budgets, is by having that focus where there is co-funding or subsidies or whatever the case may be from government or other parties for us. And I think that will hold us well as we go through some final matters or final negotiations, obviously particularly with Tupua Horenuku, which we discussed earlier. So finally, I'd just like to thank all of the councillors, our community boards, elected officials, for your work in getting out to our community. I'd like to thank our members of the public who have submitted to us, either through our formal consultation process or to us directly, and to those who put in their own individual submissions and who presented to Council as well. We know that we've been able to build in much of that feedback to our process this time, but a lot of it will also go into our long-term plan, which we're already underway in doing as well. So I do think that we have been able to strike the right balance with this budget. It is, I believe, a good balance between affordability for our residents, for our ratepayers, and also not delaying or avoiding some of the major challenges we face as a city, which will ultimately cost us more in the long run. And I'm happy to open it up to the floor for any other comments. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Totally support your comments, Mr. Mayor, and just say that this annual plan has been one of the most challenging ones I think I can have experienced, and I just think the work of the officers has been fantastic. The work with the co-funding with the government has just been outstanding, and it has put us in a good place. The only hard thing is the community has still lost things that they would like to see happening. Not lost, but they've slowed right down, and we do hope that we can start putting some things out there in the public eye, the little pretty things that the communities appreciate every day. So just the little treats that we can help them with in the future would be good for the long-term plan. But well done everyone on this annual plan.
Councillor Shaw.
I was just thinking the amount of information or public information that goes out in our booklets well prior to this point kind of makes it look a little bit simple. But underneath all of that work is a huge amount of complexity to strike a balance. And I think that saying is really apt because it's really been quite difficult. But the great thing is that front of mind has always been rates affordability for our citizens. And the challenges have been really substantial. I just want to thank Joe, Jenny, the leadership team and your teams for the presentation of the material. That really helps with our community's understanding and how we reach this position. And also the amount of central government funding that's come into our coffers as well has been outstanding. So just a big thanks for everybody involved, and thank you from me and community-minded people who don't really have that great understanding of financial budget sheets, but thank you for all of the work that you do that enable us to understand how we come to this decision.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think you said it very well, but I'm sure we've all got heavy hearts passing a level of rate increase that we are, and it's especially hefty increases for businesses, and quite frankly, some worrying levels of debt that keep rising. But as you've said, Mr. Mayor, much of this are cost rises that are well outside our control, and we have made, I think, significant efforts to find savings. We're leaving positions on our staff unfilled. We're quite possibly knocking down some buildings not too far from here that probably no one wants to see go. We're raising parking fees that would otherwise have to be met by a further rate increase. But we're also very aware that if we don't do reactive and proactive maintenance on our Three Water and other assets, and we've got some decisions coming up on road maintenance as well, I think we've learnt that lesson, that we must keep up that investment. Otherwise we're just kicking the can down the road. So as you've said, Mr. Mayor, I think we've struck a good balance.
Councillor Stellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do want to also extend my thanks to the staff for what's been a very difficult, challenging annual plan. They're always difficult, I suppose, but just with the financial pressures at the moment, unprecedented in my experience. So I do appreciate all that work. Probably don't remember, but way back at the beginning, I think it might have even been last year, one of our first meetings, I said, I hope I come to the end of this process fully endorsing and agreeing with everything in our plan. I think I've probably got 99% there. You'll notice I voted in favour of pretty much everything. There's a couple of points I just wanted to make at this stage. I mentioned when will we get the chance to discuss the actual document and other things. We haven't really had a Q&A on that, but there was a couple of things in there I just wanted to raise. I've raised them before, and since we are in effect endorsing that document at this meeting, I just want to be sure of one thing and challenge us on another. So the first one is, I note still in there we have the draft from the draft annual plan, which refers to the savings and avoided costs. No issues with the savings and how we've talked about that. But I do think if we're going to talk about the 12.9 million in avoided costs, we should also mention the 21 million extra costs, which were put in prior to those costs, some of those costs being avoided. So I suppose in a way we talk about we've cut the cloth. Well, what we've actually done is we've acquired a bigger piece of cloth and then we've given it a trim. Anyway, I won't say any more about that, but I hope that is presented in a way that's clearer to ratepayers or residents and others as to actually what's happened. The other thing I mentioned with some questions I asked of the staff back in February and got some pretty comprehensive responses to those. And that was, and the one I'm referring to was specifically one about KPIs. And in there we had a range of, well, we still have a range of targets for the service levels we'll deliver. The ones I questioned were related to visitation to our key facilities, and the targets were set, if I remember correctly, based on COVID levels plus 25% or year-to-date extrapolated, which are still significantly below what they were before. So my challenge was that why aren't we more optimistic or ambitious with getting visitors' numbers back up in those facilities? Our targets don't reflect that. So I've raised it a few times and promised it would come up again with more information, but it hasn't happened. So at the last minute, I'm kind of mentioning it again. And if there is anything being done by the annual plan working group, I would ask that perhaps they raise that with the staff. I mean, just as a suggestion, why not set those targets at current levels, recovering to bridging 50% of the gap between what they are now and what they used to be, something like that, just to show we are working on re-attracting people to our facilities. Of course, if we don't, what that really means is the cost per visit, the subsidy that ratepayers are providing to each visit to our facilities is significantly higher than what it used to be. Getting close to the end, thank you for your patience. So the final one is just to reiterate comments I've made before, that I don't agree with the level of rates increase. People want to ask me, well, how can you do that when you voted in favour of pretty much every item of expenditure? I don't want to go into the reasons again, but I will if councillors insist, but I've made them publicly. If you look at the Hutt News a couple of weeks ago, you'll see I've given where I think there are opportunities to reduce our costs in there. So I know the resolutions have been, the recommendations have been moved en masse, but I would like my my vote, if you like, recorded in some way against the level of the rates increase. And finally, it's just alarming to see the level of rates increase for particularly our CBD businesses, but all businesses. And I think part of that is due to the policy, particularly when we have Queensgate valuations moving up and down and how it impacts the others. So I hope in the LTP, and I'm sure this will, but that we take the opportunity to revisit how that policy is applied, so that we have less variations, which could be very difficult for our businesses to take up or down, you know. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor, and I certainly will take away the editorial suggestions or concerns that you've had with the working group, so I can take that, and also around the KPIs, but I'm not quite sure if that's one we'll be able to solve at that session, but thank you for your comments. Councillor Dyer, then Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fully support your opening remarks. And I was going to make the similar point to Councillor Edwards. The thing that has kind of been lost in the last couple of weeks as we've got to the end of this period is all those belt tightening exercises we did early on in this process and also in the LTP. They haven't been talked about so much now, but there was a lot of great work then to actually reduce this increase by as much as possible. One thing I'm still not happy to see is that the balanced budget has got worse. We've pushed that out 2 years, and I really do hope through the long-term plan process and with also the reset with Three Waters, we are able to try and get this under wraps. Another point I want to make is that obviously this time around we've also got the property revaluations happening at the same time. So for some parts of our city, they will feel a lot more of a pinch than others. So just keeping that front of mind as well. It's hard to understand how these things work for the public. And the final point I want to make is that you can't vote in favour of pretty much everything and then not vote to fund it, or even suggest any reductions anywhere along the way. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So thank you.
Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has been a journey to get to this point. And of course, the options were clear before us at the time in terms of how we fund this annual plan program. And doing that through partially rates and debt was the only option forward in this economic environment. And so we have got here after some due consideration and due diligence. And so I do want to thank the officers who have put in a lot of hard work to get to this point, but also our community and the submissions they've put forward. Our community boards and those in the community championing and consulting and engaging with their constituencies. It has been difficult decision making on our part, but ultimately I know that at the end of the day we have to uphold our kaitiakitanga, which is the good governance custodians of the public purse. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that water infrastructure has been a huge priority, and it certainly was the case, and the feedback from the community, certainly during the election period for us, as well as during this annual plan process. So I hope that we have been responsive to the needs of residents in our communities. Kia ora.
Councillor Barrett.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. I think I've been pretty open right from the start where I have voted against the 9.9% rates rise, and I do that with numerous talking to members of our community. That said, I say that with a great deal of respect from what officers have done, and the very, very hard work that has gone behind putting this plan together. I don't know how we're going to do this, but I still would like it noted that I am not happy with the 9.9% rates rise. Thank you.
We can take that item separately. Yep. Okay, any other comments? No? Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just talk briefly. Firstly, it doesn't get any easier doing these annual plans and long-term plans year after year. And it's been mentioned with the cost pressures as well as our infrastructure challenges, we really do need to continue to front up to those challenges and be honest with our community about what it means to actually provide the level of service that they expect. In this annual plan, I see very little nice to haves. It's, a lot of the things that we could be doing aren't actually in the next year ahead. There's been some deferrals which have been key to getting us to a point where we can actually keep the rates increase to 9.9% on average. If we were to do all of the things that we'd intentionally put in the plan 2 years ago, it would be far more costly than the rates increase that we are facing today of 9.9. I don't think any of us we're looking forward to increasing the rates, let alone by 9.9%, but it's just the honesty and the reality of what we need to do as a city is to face up to that cost and tell our community that one of the worst things for us to do would be to kind of minimise that rates increase, do less work, defer the core business of council and the maintenance and the repairs and the capital works that need to occur, and then the reality of that cost increase exponentially in years to come, as well as the community being shocked by the service levels not being met. And so today I will be supporting the 9.9% rates increase, taking into account that's the cost to deliver all of the aspects that we've been discussing and we'll be signing off today.
Thank you. And just to wrap up with a comment as well, thank you for the contributions there. And I also did miss on my list, but Councillor Dyer did point it out, that the property revaluations, does make it a little bit different for people in our community on what the actual dollar impact will be on them. And it's great to hear that over 1,000 people did check out our rates calculator. And I do really encourage people, if you are wanting to really know what this means for your budget, that you do utilise that tool to be able to plan for that. But also I just wanted to, and I know I talk about this a bit, but in my mind, how we prepare this budget, the challenges that we get put under around how to fund long-term infrastructure versus affordability really illustrates how broken local government funding arrangements are in New Zealand. This is an issue which we talk about on the regular in forums in local government New Zealand. And as you know, I'm on National Council. It's an issue that continues to come up year on year, because for some people through a rate system, a 9.9%, they may be able to make that work depending on their income, who lives in the house. We know for someone who is on a fixed income, who may be a superannuant, that can have a big impact on them, particularly if they are asset rich and cash poor. So the system is broken, and particularly how we make significant funding decisions around long-term infrastructure. And also I worry about what the future looks like when we start to really seriously deal with issues around climate change, resilience, adaptation, if we do not change our system here. And I'm hopeful that some of those challenges will be discussed in the Future of Local Government report. But I'm also slightly nervous of what actual pickup or what actual change will come from that. But I know that we'll be part of that conversation as well. So I suppose I just wanted to get on my little hobby horse and mention that because it is a real frustration in how we obviously go through this process and some of the things where we are hamstring and hand-tied on. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. We'll take 9.9, sorry, number 8 separately. So all but number 8. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Item number 8, which is around the 9.9% rates increase. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. We've discussed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against no. And we'll have, if you like that recorded. Yep. I declare that carried. Yep. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. So questions, we've received no questions, and so we can move straight to, okay, we can close the meeting. I'll bang on 11 a.m. For this annual plan subcommittee meeting. And we'll move straight into council. So welcome everyone to this full council meeting of the council. No, okay. So I'll just grab my. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll go through quickly. We won't do our opening karakia. We'll just finish with our closing. Apologies. We'll note the apologies of Councillor Morgan and Councillor Brown. Seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against no. Councillor Briggs seconding. No public comment. Any conflict of interest declarations? No. So moving to item 5, which is recommendation to council from the long-term plan annual plan subcommittee held on the 7th of June. So this recommendation is that council approves the recommendations in relation to the draft annual plan 23-24 and any amendments agreed at the long-term plan annual plan subcommittee meeting held on the 7th of June. So I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour, all those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Moving on to questions. And I have received no questions. So now we just move to public exclusion of the public. That the public be excluded from the following parts of proceedings, namely recommendation to council on the transport contract cost increases. So do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Stallinger, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. So I now declare the public part of the meeting closed at 11:02 a.m.